Hi, I'm Monica Cesarato, a food and travel blogger in Venice. Welcome to Venice Meets, a series of live chats from Instagram every day at 6 p.m. CET. Today, I will be talking to Gregory Dowling, novelist, literary critic and professor of Anglo-American Literature at University Foscari in Venice.
Hello, Gregory.
Hello. Thanks so much for this.
That's fine. So you promised dolphins. You told me we will have dolphins.
Of course. We're all here enjoying the dolphins in the canals.
But you know, funny enough, I was having a look. There's a video from 2016. There was a dolphin between the Arsenale and the Giudecca.
Oh, right.
There's actually, but what's happening, he actually got stranded. He didn't just come in and put, it's not like he was swimming. He just got stranded by the boat. Anyway, how is life in Venice in quarantine?
Well, I'm one of the very lucky people that I'm still working. Being a state employee, teaching at the university, so I'm going on with that. I'm certainly in Venice, I'm among the few fortunates, because of course most people, this city which is almost entirely dependent on tourism, all of that has stopped. But I'm still doing my regular job in a rather strange way, doing my lessons on.
You have to do everything online, right?
Done online, which was rather difficult at first. I found it was a rather odd experience, but as I got into it, it's become, well, it's now just the way I do it, and the students do seem to appreciate, the efforts that we're making, and so and you do establish one thing I find very helpful, for example, is that when you are doing it by Google Hangouts, when you're talking to the students all have their names under their images, and that's a great help, because I can never remember the student's name. That's one little advantage.
Yeah, I think that actually, right at the beginning, I was talking to a parent, we're talking about when we just first got in the lockdown, and I just started doing the talks. And I remember talking to somebody and saying that I thought, in a way, I was hoping that this, once we eventually go back to normality, or some kind of normality, but what happened to education, to the digitalization of education, is going to be brought forward. Not so much for university, because I realize that obviously kids at university are already very digital and stuff, but mainly for primary and secondary school. I think it was very important to do, for teachers to understand that they can do this. Because, sometimes you have kids staying home sick for a long time. And
so that will no longer be an excuse. Yes, that's an interesting.
An excuse. But I watch it from
people ask.
I had one of my sons was on for nearly 2 months when he was younger, because he had mononucleosis, and it was terrible because he nearly lost a year because of that, and he was one of the top of his class. But because he was missing out in so many hours, instead this way, I think it would be very good. In this situation.
That's an interesting thought. I hadn't thought of it quite in those terms. Yes.
See, I'm the practical one. I'm looking at practical ways.
And of course, I do find that when I'm get into some kind of technical problem with the students, for example, when I find I'm unable to share a video that I thought I was able to share, the students always know how to do it, and they give me instructions.
Solve the problem, yes. The only thing probably what you find it harder maybe a bit with the connection, because in Italy we are not exactly that good with our Wi-Fi system, and Venice is a black hole.
Right. No, so far I haven't had any problems. I've had students occasionally tell me that they're not, that their connection is not working. I mean, my connection has so far not been a problem.
Oh, that's good.
What is going to be interesting is in the exam session that's coming up, and how we're going to do that.
That's what I think it's a big, question mark.
Yeah. I mean, as it is with the esame di maturità, this is the big question: how the students going to do it.
I know. I mean, I got one of my sons is at university. He's doing maths. He was lucky because he actually gave the last exam that he needed to give this year the day before the lockdown, so it was But he was saying to me, he doesn't know, if they don't go back to school, he just doesn't know what we're going to do, because of course maths, it can be, is all written down. And of course,
I mean, I've always tended to do most of my exams as written exams, particularly the literature exams I do. But for the next session, I'm thinking that I will do a part of it as an oral exam at least, because it's just so it's just so problematic otherwise. I mean, if I can get them to write essays for me without any problems, but part of my literature exam is I ask them to identify lines from poems, just to make sure they do know the poems, and that will be difficult to monitor, obviously.
Of course. Oh well, you're gonna have to rethink.
Yes.
You'll find a way. So, what is actually life walking around Venice? Must be so strange. We're not tourists.
We're not really supposed to be doing that much walking around.
You can from 9 to 10 now.
From next week. But for example, they said that the bookshops are open twice a week. So I live at St. Helena, the easternmost tip, and there are no bookshops anywhere near where we live. So I took advantage of that, and I went to the Goldoni bookshop which is my nearest bookshop in the centre. And so I was I walked all the way across the city, crossing an empty Piazza San Marco. I had my autocertificazione, if anybody stopped me. Nobody did. So I took advantage of that. Also, I'm lucky that living at St. Helena, 200 meters, we're allowed to walk 200 meters from our own homes. And that really takes me all around the island of St. Helena, which is a wonderful walk. I get all these.
I know.
I don't have that claustrophobic sense. I can see.
Yeah, because you've got trees everywhere. You got trees.
Yes, no, we're in a very fortunate situation in that sense. Yes.
Yeah,
I mean, my wife works as a tour manager, and obviously her work is in limbo at the moment. So.
Oh yeah, welcome to the club.
But at least one wage is coming into the family for the moment, and.
It's gonna be strange. I don't know.
Yes.
Hi, Philip. Sorry, Philip is saying hi. And then I saw Kathy Gonzalez as well before she was saying. Okay, so let's talk about your books.
Okay.
So first of all, I want to know, when did you actually start writing?
When did I start writing? I think I started writing at about the age of 7 or 8.
Oh, right. Oh, you're an early starter.
I've always wanted to be a writer, and I was, writing stories, etc. as a child. But my first novel wasn't published until I was 29, in fact. So
you're young.
I had 4 novels published in the 1980s and 1990s. And they got nice reviews, but they didn't really I certainly couldn't live on my writing. I was teaching at the time. I was already at the university. And after those 4 novels, which were all thrillers set in, contemporary thrillers, I thought I'd try something different. And I wrote a children's novel, a sort of fantasy novel. And it was about, there were things like wizards and things like that. And my agent at the time and the publishers basically all said to me, this is the 1990s. Children aren't interested in things like wizards. Forget about it.
Let's remember Harry Potter.
That shows you how much publishers understand things. Anyway.
Yes.
And so I decided that at that point I really had to, if you like, consolidate my academic career. And so I turned to my academic writing, academic publishing, to make sure that I had a future there at least. Always with the idea that I was going to go back to novel writing, but it took a very long time. And in fact, it was another 20 years until I I published 4 novels between 1985 and 1994. So 1994, my 4th novel came out. And then it wasn't until 2015.
Wow!
Ascension, which was my return to fiction, and the start of writing historical fiction. And then I followed that up with.
Then again, you needed the background in living in Venice to be able to write a book.
Yeah. I had written 1 novel set in Venice, back in the 1990s, I'd written a novel called Every Picture Tells a Story, which is still available as a Kindle book. And I'm quite happy with it. It didn't sell enormously, but it's still out there if anybody's interested. But I decided one of the problems I found with writing fiction was I wrote a novel. For example, my second novel was called See Naples and Kill. Oh, that's my favorite title. See Naples and Kill. That was actually translated into Italian, Vedi Napoli e poi spara. And that novel I felt was very up to date because I wrote it and I just bought myself a Walkman. Do you remember Walkmans? And the novel was all based on...
I'm that old too, Gregory. I'm that old too.
And so in the novel, there's this cassette tape of a conversation in which somebody is ordering a killing. And the whole novel revolves around people trying to get hold of this cassette tape, which is very compromising. And I thought I was being really up to date. This was the latest thing, etc. And of course, nowadays, if you publish that novel, practically you have to, republish it with a footnote explaining what is a cassette tape.
You could do as a vintage. It could be a vintage find.
Yes, exactly. There is that that possibility. But so then I thought to myself, well, if you don't want your novels to go out of date, set them in the past where they're already, so to speak, out of date. And so I decided I would like to write a novel set in the 18th century because I felt familiar enough. I'd read Goldoni plays, I'd read Casanova's memoirs, and I felt I had a sense of what life in Venice was like in that period. So I went for it, and it
was a clue as well. It was the last.
It was the last moment of splendor. Yeah.
Of splendor.
The interesting thing is that when Carnival was revived in Venice in the 1980s, the very end of the 70s. Yeah, when it was revived, of course, everybody was looking back. Everybody was dressing up in costumes from the 18th century, and that is the image so many people. Although Venice's greatest splendor was in the 60s, in terms of art, was the 16th century. Certainly, in the popular imagination, I think people think of Casanova. And they
because it was decadent, because it was all these luxurious,
wigs and cloaks and etc. And so that felt to me that it had possibilities, and so I went for it.
And to have put a secret service, I love that.
Well, Venice did have the most efficient secret service in the world, probably at the time, and always had. There's a very good book has come out about, oh gosh, I'm going to get the name of the author wrong. I won't. Giordano is the surname. It's a very good book which was published last year, but basically a history of the Venetian Secret Service, and I do recommend that to anybody who's interested. It was too late to be of help to my first novels, but I'm certainly going to use the information I've gleaned from it in future novels. And my character is somebody who gets dragged into. He doesn't want to be a spy, but he's persuaded by il Missier Grando, basically, he's drummed into the service. And so he's a reluctant spy, but not a bad one. He's a pretty good spy in many ways. The other thing, of course, is that he's an Anglo-Venetian. He was born in Venice, but as a child was taken by his opera singing or his actress mother to England, and so he grew up in England.
And this is interesting because actually it sounds strange, but actually probably it would have happened, because I have a friend in London that actually does a tour in London of all the references in buildings of Venice, where you can see the lion and other references from the Republic of Venice in London. So this connection was always there anyway, so it wouldn't be so,
right,
you know.
right, yeah, yeah. And the other thing, I remember when you were interviewing Philip, and Philip, you asked Philip about his protagonist, Nathan.
Yes, yeah.
And he said he didn't feel confident in writing a first-person novel with an Italian protagonist. And basically that's the same thing I felt. So my protagonist is half Venetian, but with an English background. So
because,
he feels...
yeah, because you've been living here. How many years have you been here in Italy now?
I've been living here for 39 years. So...
Okay. So you're definitely after.
But, you know, it's where you grew up that really creates who you are. And so I still feel I'm un foresto a Venezia.
You will always be. I'm a foresta.
There'll always be.
You're from the countryside, yeah. So it's okay.
Un campagnola. Un campagnola.
Oh, yeah, of course. Of course. And proud as well.
But I kind of felt that I wanted a protagonist who was Venetian, who felt a strong tie to Venetian, even an emotive connection with the city, but also had the possibility of looking at it from the outside. And so I thought that that would work. And then he's also a guide, un cicerone. So that's helpful in that I can use that side of him, you know, to explain facets of Venetian life to the reader when necessary, without it seeming too...
yeah,
you know,
and Venetians, what people don't actually realize a lot, because I think nowadays maybe Venetians have changed a little bit, is that Venetians were talkative people. They were welcoming, you know, foreign people, and they were more than happy to have merchants, travelers all the time. So they would have been exchanging and explaining.
Oh yes, yes.
That's very good. So yeah, and I love the name that you chose. Is so Venetian. You could have picked him more Venetian.
And
Marango.
My second novel, in fact, my second one, the Four Horsemen, is dedicated to my nephew Alvise. So
okay, that's good. Yeah, I got a friend that she's actually writing a book, and she was set in Venice. And when we were discussing on the names, she was telling me the names of the people, and my eye went immediately like, that's not a Venetian name. I said, no, that's definitely not a Venetian name. That's a very Napolitan name. So, okay, so what are the names? Yeah. So I gave her a list of Venetian names that are more believable, say. But I know an American reads it wouldn't understand, but I know.
Salvatore or...
Sorry, no, well, yeah, there's some of the names also I told there's got to be Giovanni, Giacomo, Marco, you know, Luca, Mattia, Matteo, you know, all of these, you know. Yeah. There's a question here. Alvise's English opera Singing Mother is always fascinating. Are you tempted to bring more of the backstory into your next Marango novel?
That's definitely on the cards. Yeah, yes, she's going to become more prominent, definitely. Okay, but I don't want to say anything more at the moment. But there's a backstory to Alvise which has been hinted at, and I want to develop more. Yeah, I want to develop that. Yes.
So, at what stages are you with the third one?
The third novel is planned. It's planned. At the moment, we're waiting for. At the moment, there's no definite contract with the publisher. There's the publishers are being sort of hedgy at the moment. And, I'd like to go ahead, but I'm also planning. I've been planning another novel set in Venice in the 1930s, and I was thinking of having it actually take place at the very during the first meeting between Hitler and Mussolini, which of course took place in Venice. And
they came over my neck of the woods.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Now, that would be
as a background.
Yeah, also because the 30s in Venice were very interesting periods. It's also, I think, isn't it the time they built the Scalzi Bridge as well? I think.
Yeah,
just before the
and
yeah.
the Academia.
So,
The Academia
yeah,
and the Scout,
yeah.
both bridges were built.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
So
yeah.
that's a very. I
The,
think it's a very interesting time
well,
for.
rebuilt. They were remade in the
Yeah.
1930s. Yeah.
So yeah, that would be very interesting. I don't think there are very many novels set in that kind of period. Also because it's a strange kind of period to talk about because the building up of the fascists and so on. Not an easy task.
A friend of mine and a friend of Philip's as well, David Hewson. I don't know. You know David, don't you? David Hewson.
Yeah, I don't know him personally, but yes.
Another writer of crime fiction. His next novel is set in Venice during the Second World War. It's set at the. It's a contemporary novel, but then, or rather, I think it's the 1980s. But then flashbacks to the a large portion of the novel is set during the war, and it's very good. I would say. But that's due out next year. Yeah.
Wow! I can't wait to read that. But how did you end up in Venice?
It's so long ago I can hardly remember. No,
first of all, where are you from in England?
I'm from Bristol.
Okay.
Bristol, which I often find I have to explain to Italians that it's near Bath. I mean, Bristol is about 5 times the size of Bath, but Italians know Bath.
I'm just saying one word: fish pond.
How on earth do you know fish ponds?
Because when I used to work in England, my boss was from Bristol, from Fish Pond, and his manager as well was from there. So he's actually, his wife was the councillor of Bristol.
Oh, really?
She was a. Yep. So I'm probably one of the few people in Italy who knows about Bristol.
Yeah, a few people knows about fish ponds, I think.
Oh yes.
Anyway,
okay.
So what was the? Oh yes, how did I end up in Venice? Well, I came to Italy straight after university. I wanted a year abroad. I didn't know what to do. I thought, well, I'll just have 1 year abroad, and I got a job at a language school first in Naples, and then I moved to Siena. And then I moved to Verona. So I was taught in these 3 cities, one after the other. And while I was in Verona, I was beginning to think to myself, I really ought to go back and get a proper job, a real job. I ought to go back and do a teacher's training, something in England. But while I was in Verona, I used to go almost every weekend to Venice. And so I said to myself, if I could just have, yes, I'll go back, but if I could just have 1 year in Venice. And so I got a job at a language school in Venice, the Oxford School.
Okay.
And then I wormed my way into the university somehow. And that's it. And during the course, and along the way, I also got married, and so here we are.
Yeah. But you obviously, I'm just saying it for some people, but you obviously speak Venetian, not just Italian. Of course.
I mean,
tell me you do.
I can if I want. I mean, I don't often because Venetians never take it seriously when a foreigner speaks Venetian.
Not true. We do like it.
I find out one of the easy, if I want an easy laugh in a lesson, I find if I just drop in a word in Venetian, that the students all find it amazing. It's really rather curious that Venetians often kind of think that it's a secret language that only they know, and the idea that a foreigner, might know a few words. How did you learn that? I mean, you can't live in Venice for 39 years and not learn Venetian. It's impossible.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
I mean, my sons both speak Venetian, obviously. Yeah. So.
Yeah. It's really funny because both my sons speak English, but only one speaks Venetian because the little one, we always spoke English at home, and then at school he spoke Italian. So I never actually realized until he's 22. It was about a couple of months ago. We were speaking at the table with his other brother, and we were speaking Venetian, and his other brother, and he was keep answering in Italian. And I said to him, why don't you just answer Venetian? He says, Mom, I don't speak Venetian. I said, what do you mean you don't speak Venetian? I told you. He says, no, Mom, you never told me. You used to speak English to me. Oh, okay.
Right. So are they both bilingual then?
Yeah. Because their dad is British. So so when was happening? when we lived in England, I used to speak Italian to both of them, strictly only Italian, because I knew that English was everywhere. When we came back here, I made sure that I tried as much as I can just to speak English in the house, that we would speak maybe Italian, Venetian when we were out of the house for respect of people, whatever. Or, as you say, if we wanted to, if we didn't want people to know what we were talking about, then I was speaking English as you try to do, you know, when you don't want people. But it's really funny because we both speak English, but with a very strong Italian accent. I don't know if it's the same with your son. But mine, yeah, it's so funny. They just, and then after a while, when they speak to English people, they go back to, you know, a proper accent, or let's say the lack of an accent. Actually, I would say, because of course, when you live,
I think
you know,
both of my sons can pass as English. They can pass as English without any problems.
Okay. See, but do they go back to UK as well often?
Well, in fact, my younger son is living in London at the moment.
Okay.
My older son lived quite a while. He lived for quite a while in London, and then he lived. He's also lived in Turkey, you know, where he was using English at work. You know, he was an English teacher, in fact. So yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my younger son can also do a very good Glaswegian accent because he went to university in Glasgow, so he can.
I love that. Oh, that's hard. I remember watching Ramsey Nesby when I was in the UK, and I did his subtitles on them. Oh my God, that's hard to understand. So somebody was writing, when are you going to do an Alvise short story? Just to, you know.
I suspect that was Jill. I suspect that was Jill.
Yes, it was
it?
It's Jill that makes it.
Yes, I told her I would, and I'm going to. Okay, so it's in the pipeline.
Like a teaser, so you know, people don't, you know, while they're waiting for the big book, you know, some kind of preamble.
Keep things warm for them. Yeah. So
it's
a good idea. I'm very grateful to Jill because she's a great encourager.
Oh my God! She should be given the award for the best fun for Venice. You know, between the artists and the writers, the guides, and oh my God, between her and Joan Locktoff of Dream of Venice, they should be running the marketing for Venice, not the people in charge at the moment. But told me it's too soon to do any marketing for Venice. That's the answer I got from Mr. Brugnaro. But never mind that. What I want to know is, do you think you're going to be writing a book set in a different time and in a different city? Or do you think you'll always be writing about Venice and what you know?
I mean, if I continue with Alvise will be based in Venice. But I'm quite keen in taking Alvise on the, let's say, taking him out of Venice. I would love to set another novel. I've already written one set in Naples, and I'd love to take Alvise down south.
On a grand tour.
I also on a grand tour. Yes. I mean, one idea is that he could become a guide for somebody doing the grand tour, and then accompany, you know, an English aristocrat around Venice, around Italy. And I have ideas for that in the future. I'm also would like to do something with Ravenna, because Ravenna is a city I go to regularly.
Beautiful.
And
I love it.
There are very important times, because I'm involved in we're creating a Byron museum in Ravenna. And so
I remember you mentioned that to me last time we spoke. Yes. I want to know more about this. Go on, tell us.
Right. So, well, the Byron Museum is in Palazzo Guiccioli, which is the palazzo that Byron lived in between 1819 and 1821, and it's being restored, and it's going to become the Museo del Risorgimento e il Museo di Lord Byron. There is already a Museo del Risorgimento. Sorry?
But is this the first ever Lord Byron? Is this the first Lord Byron museum in Italy? Would this be the first one ever?
It's the first Byron. Yes, it's the first Byron. It is the first Byron museum in Italy. I mean, there is the Keats Shelley Museum in Rome, which has, you know, a certain amount of memorabilia and a certain amount of material connected with Byron. But this is the first museum specifically devoted to Byron in Italy. Yes. And the so yes, there is already a Risorgimento museum in Ravenna, but it's not very satisfactory as a museum. This is going to provide much more space for it, and it's being financed by the Cassa di Risparmio di Ravenna. So there's good, solid financial backing, and it was due. The idea was that it would open this autumn, but I think that's almost certainly not going to happen because, well, because of, you know, the current situation. And it should become a kind of centre for Byron studies.
So they can do conferences.
We've already held a few conferences there, and in fact, 2 years ago, every year there is an international conference somewhere in the world, and 2 years ago we held it in Ravenna.
Was it hard for you to find the material to put in the museum?
Me, but yes, you.
Sorry, your connection is going to be funny. Yeah, I'm here, but your connection is a bit funny.
Yes.
I'm not sure if it's your connection or mine. Okay, good. I was saying, was it hard to find
Could you hear me?
Yeah, no, you keep breaking up. I said, was it hard to find the material for the museum?
Well, there is in the Biblioteca Classense in Ravenna, they have the holdings of the Teresa Guiccioli. Teresa Guiccioli was Byron's lover from Ravenna. He was the reason he went to live in Ravenna, and she had a number of there are manuscripts, there are certain amounts documents, and there was also things like Byron's traveling case, even fragments of Byron's sunburnt skin, which she had lovingly preserved.
What? Oh my God!
And so
that's a bit too much.
That's a little bit. Anyway, so these items will provide the core of the museum, and the director, or the man who's the director of our committee, Donatino Domini, who was the director of the Classense Library some years back, he's been collecting on eBay and everywhere, as much other stuff as he can, first editions, manuscripts, and we've now got quite a decent amount of material. And so, yeah, it's going to be an interesting museum, I think. Yeah,
that would be interesting. Did you actually manage to get material from Venice as well?
We haven't got anything specific from Venice, no, because there isn't anything of Byron in Venice that I know of. No, I mean, not that I know of. No.
Unless you go and take a plaque and take it away.
Yeah, I mean, Palazzo Mocenigo is a wonderful place, etc. But there's nothing in it that actually now belonged to Byron. Yeah. Okay.
But Ravenna, oh my God, that would be beautiful, and it's going to be also brilliant for the city, as it's already a beautiful city to go and visit. But from the point of view of the good tourism, because I'm pretty sure that people that will want to go and see that kind of museum, they got to be people interested in it and in literature, and so it's going to be a certain kind of quality too.
And one of the things I've always liked about going to Ravenna is when I go there, I always spend the night there. And Ravenna is a city that gets a very large number of visitors coming to see the mosaics, obviously, but most of them are coming for the day, and they come in on coaches. So by about 5 or 6 o'clock, it returns to being a small Italian town. And when you come from Venice, that's quite welcome, Now, of course, the situation in Venice is what it is. But usually, leaving the tourist hordes and going to this city and finding this sort of nice, quiet human dimension is very attractive. It's a lovely city there.
I found that when I went to Ferrara, that is very similar to Ravenna as in the idea. It was the same kind of thing. You walk in and everybody's going around on a bicycle, and you go like, oh, okay. So there are, all the students and stuff, and you can walk around the wall. It's beautiful.
I've spent so many hours at Ferrara station because, of course, that's where I change to get the train to Bologna. Excuse me, to get the train to Ravenna. And almost inevitably, there's there's an hour wait. You arrive and the train for Ravenna has just left, and so I've got to do that. And the trouble is, the centre of Ferrara is too far from the station to be able to go and have a decent wander within the space of an hour. So I've got to know that station very, very well. And its bar.
Listen, the good thing is that in Emilia-Romagna the food is good, so even at the train stations. That's a good thing that you go. So obviously it's not gonna be October where we're gonna be launching it, but probably a few months later. I mean, obviously all according to what's happening all over Italy, I assume.
Well, yes,
but it's kind of ready to go in a way.
Yeah, I mean, originally we were hoping that it would open in 1819, which would have been 2 centuries after Byron's arrival in the city.
Oh,
so now
that would
maybe we'll have our opening 2 centuries after his departure from the city, which will be in 2021. Anyway.
Still a good connection. Okay, so I just really wanted to know how, we were talking about life before in Venice, because everybody keeps saying to me, I keep receiving these questions, can you interview people that live in Venice? We want to know the daily life in Venice. So, for the people that are watching us who are not living in Italy at the moment, how tough it is to go during the quarantine, shopping, going around. I know you're in Arsenale, so that you're a bit far away, but obviously most of the shops are closed. A queue, do you have to do long queues? What is it like? Because I know what it's like here. And are you missing things in shops?
Okay. So here on St. Helena, we have a greengrocer's, we have a small groceries shop. We've got the absolute essentials, and usually it's just a question of standing in a queue and waiting. It takes 10 minutes longer than it usually does. We can also go to the Lido, for the supermarket on the Lido, which is one Vaporetto stop away. And I go to Via Garibaldi as well, because at Via Garibaldi I go to get the wine. There's a wonderful wine shop.
Via Garibaldi is usually full of restaurants and stuff, so everything's shut down at the moment in the department.
Everything's good, yeah. I mean, Via Garibaldi, still has a number of shops, so it's all. So when you go there to the shops, there are all these. I remember somebody posted a photograph on Facebook a while ago saying, what's the matter with people? Don't they know we're supposed to be at home? Because it was this photo of Via Garibaldi which looked like crowds of people. But in fact, when you looked closely at the photo, they were all people standing in line, either to enter the supermarket or the fishmongers. There wasn't this assembramento, this sort of thronging. People were going to shops. And I find that people, accept this discipline of standing in line, with 1 meter or 2 meters. They accept it very well. Yes, I think I quite like going to the shops because it's another excuse to go for a walk, get out of the town, get out of the house. Yeah.
Right. Our Jill is asking me.
So
do you?
Too much.
It's okay. I'm trying to. Do you expect Venice to be able to adopt a more human dimension after the quarantine? And what sort of future would you like for your adopted city?
Yeah. Venice is suffering that problem from being a city based almost entirely on one industry. As my wife said, it's like Ireland with the potatoes. And I suppose I belong to the only other major employer in the city, that is the university. I think once you apart from the municipal offices, it's either tourism or the university is what
of course,
is keeping the city going, and of course 90% of it is tourism, and that's too much. And it's they
hold on. Your connection. Hold on 1 second. Sorry, your connection is breaking up.
I'm continuing to talk, but I'm not sure whether what I'm saying is actually getting across.
Yeah, no, we're not seeing
Monica,
you. Hang on just a second. Yeah, okay. You keep breaking up.
I'm sorry. I don't know what I can do to I mean.
Okay, now it's okay.
Yeah. No, I was just saying that we all hope that that tourism will become something more manageable, and that clearly Venice needs tourists. Venice must have visitors, but they must come in manageable numbers, and alternative sources of revenue must be found. I mean, it seems to me that I saw the interview with Jill. Jill is very, very sensible on this subject. But
I know.
She's obviously a much more practical person. She's a financial journalist. I don't have that kind of expertise. But I think everybody knows that there were too many tourists.
I think what the problem is, I think, in Venice at the moment, that the main problem in Venice at the moment is that we do have the opportunity to change things in Venice. The people that should do it are not asking the right people. There should be a task force. I was saying the other day, there should be a task force made up of professors that know the economy, know their study, and they have the academical part, but also composed of normal people that can be practical. So if you give me a plan, but it's not doable, it might look good on paper, but then I come to you and say, yeah, but how do I pay the bill if you do that? Then it should be a task force made up of all different categories, of all different walks of life, to be able to get to a point where you say, like, for example, right now we did a contract, many Airbnb apartments were put at the disposal of the students. Great, fantastic, it was about time. But at the same time, why didn't we do it, like Jill said, turn it into a system by which you give housing back to the people that want to live in Venice, not to visit Venice. That way, the more people live in the city, you get people to work back in the city. You start to have a proper system. Oh, you're gone again? Okay, sorry. Yeah, go.
Yeah. I mean, when my son was, he'd been away, he'd been living in Naples and Rome, and he came back to Venice. This is the one who's now living in London. But he came back to Venice and he lived with us for a while, but obviously he wanted to find an apartment of his own. And he said that basically the moment he rang anybody up, when he's followed up an advertisement, the moment they heard he had a Venetian accent, that was it. They weren't interested. They weren't interested in renting to a Venetian.
I know.
And so he was toying with the idea of, putting on an English accent, putting on a... so yeah, it's a big problem. It's the Airbnb. There ought to be a way of dealing with this. There are other cities that have coped by sort of imposing more restrictions on Airbnb.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I think
you can't stop it, and it shouldn't be stopped. Yeah, I don't think it should be stopped.
Sorry, you don't think I couldn't hear what you said there. I don't think it should be.
I don't think Airbnb should be stopped because, of course, it makes sense. No. But it should be highly regulated. So you stop people having like 10 apartments and run them all out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yes, exactly.
Like
if Airbnb were exactly what it was supposed to be at the beginning, but it was
Mm-hmm.
yes, but where you've got people, as you say, managing a dozen different apartments, and yeah, that's clearly that's not exactly what the idea was originally, as I understand it, behind Airbnb, which has now become this huge global enterprise, and it's enormously damaging to so many major cities. And I think all these big tourist cities are finding. I mean, I believe in Manhattan they imposed the rule that you can't rent an apartment for less than a month.
That would be a solution.
Yeah,
absolutely. I always said it.
That would be a partial solution, certainly.
Well, that used to be the old system. The old system, if you had an apartment, it was minimum a week. So, they asking me, but you were having a very interesting conversation with David and Philip about a Venice Book Festival. That sounds so good to me, because we got the Venice Glass Week, we have the Venice Fashion Week. Why don't we have the Venice Book Week?
Yeah, I mean, there is a literary festival already, of course, as Incroci di Civiltà, which should have taken place at the beginning of April. And the idea was specifically a Venice crime fiction. There is the Mestre crime festival, which takes, and so we wouldn't really want to be setting up something in competition with that. It was a discussion we had among ourselves. We then didn't take it much further, because I think none of us has great experience in running a thing like this, and then of course COVID-19 intervened and sort of put paid to everything. I mean, it still is a nice idea for the future. I mean, it might be worth.
Also because it might help to a lot of.
See a remark.
Sorry.
Say that again.
Yeah, it's from Jill, of course.
Say that again, Monica.
I would say it will be very good as well, something like that.
I'm not hearing you. I couldn't hear what you said.
I said it will be very good also, something like this, to help all the bookshops that are slowly closing down in Venice. And you're gone again. And I cannot understand if it's your connection or my connection. Sorry. Oh, sorry.
I mean, I can see what Jill means in terms of an international festival. I think the Mestre was very much an Italian affair, and they didn't bring in many, as I understand it, there weren't many international writers coming. And I think obviously it's easier to bring international writers to Venice than it is to Mestre. That's certainly true.
But I think, Gregory, I think it's
I'm told it's my connection, because but I don't know what I can do. This is
nothing. There's nothing you can do about it. But I think a problem in Italy is always the same one. When it's organized by Italians, they think in Italian. And above all in Venice, they rarely think big. They think like that. And
I mean, I understand. I understand. Unless it's a successful crime.
But for Italians, as you say, can you imagine how big it will be if it was marketed, to all of.
I'm trying to say, I'm lifting you up to see if that makes any difference. I'm not sure. I'm going to.
Is the curse of the connections from
my iPad now? I don't know if that makes any difference.
A little bit.
I'm very sorry about the unsatisfactory
don't worry.
connection.
I said it's the curse of the connections with Venice. I know. It's always like this. I was saying that is a very typical Venetian and Italian, when we organize things, to be very Italian-centered, not to think big. So Mestre, great success, but with Italian.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think though. Yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense to have a festival which is devoted to Italian crime writers. I mean, I think that's a perfectly valid thing to want to do. And so yes, I mean, not all occasions of this sort have to be international. You know, there is a case to draw attention to the local products, which I believe is something you're very keen on, Monica.
Well, yeah, I think also because I think I'm a master in
my Wi-Fi hub.
Oh, that's okay. You're fine now. You're doing fine now. You moved. We can see you now.
Okay.
I was saying, I think the problem is that with the Mestre one, not just about, it was an Italian, it is for the Italian market as in Italy, okay? When I think if it was done in Venice, there's so many books have been set in Venice, it will be something different. It will be a bit more specific. Don't you agree?
Can I just ask, sorry, Monica, just a technical question. Is it better if I use my Wi-Fi or if I use my
phone? Probably your phone would be better.
My sort of phone connection.
Your phone would have been better.
So I should turn off my Wi-Fi, as somebody suggests.
If you turn off your Wi-Fi, yeah, you might be able to. We might be able to see. Let's go on. Sorry, guys, just a little bit of, as you know, is internet. Global, would love to come to Venice. Yes, I know. That's what I'm trying to say, Jill. Yes, so that's Sam. I will try. That's what I was trying to say at the beginning. I keep telling everybody they should all use their phone connection, but unfortunately, it's away your gigabytes. Yes.
Okay.
Hold on. Yes. See. I couldn't use it today because I've got no money left on my data anymore. But usually it is better with a phone. My children told me to.
Okay, yeah, I didn't know that. Okay, so.
Yeah. So Jill was saying that, what did she say? Global readers of Italian crime mystery novels would love to come for Venice for such a festival. Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. You know, Mestre. Yeah. Why would I want to go to Mestre? You know, for as much as I like Mestre. It's not Venice, and it could be one way. But no, so what I'm saying, it could be one way to bring a certain kind of tourists back to the city, because people will read. Hopefully, you know, I think it's all a question to try to organize events geared to a certain type of tourist.
Right.
Wherever, you know, we already got beautiful events of the Venice Glass Week, of the Venice Fashion Week, that are already that kind of things. If we go down to the road of doing something a bit more global, you know, and possibly not just in Italian, I think it's, you know, considering Venice is always been a port open, you know, this is the city of publishing in the times of,
yeah, this is the city of Aldo Manuzio, exactly. Yeah.
You know, that's what I'm saying. You know, so I'm actually surprised. Well, I mean,
the literary festival in Croce di Civiltà has always been very successful so far, and so and the only, you know, the big question is how do you, if the idea is to bring back a certain kind of tourism, but is the idea also to exclude a certain kind of tourism? Because if we're talking about reducing the numbers, are we talking about stopping people from coming? And that's the problem.
You don't stop them. I think it's an automatic, what do you call it, selection, you know? Yeah. It goes back to the, it will go back to, and trust me, I'm one for people be able to go everywhere in the world and to do it on a budget too. But I think it will be the times when finally we go back like in the 80s, in the 70s, when people used to travel using their heads, preparing, researching, and putting money away. So, you know, it wasn't just.
I think, you know, with what's happening to the airlines of the world, I think, you know, budget airlines have their days numbered. So I think inevitably the days of cheap flights, I think that those days are over. And so that's going to change things dramatically.
I think we will travel less, but travel better.
Yeah. That's the, exactly. I mean, I confess I've always liked being able to get cheap flights, but I can see that it's probably not been good for the world, and maybe we do need to, you know, think more about it.
If you think about it, Gregory, cheap applies to everything. Cheap food, you get certain thing. Cheap flight, you get. There's always the same question. If it's cheap, there is a reason why it's cheap. So maybe it's about time we go back at, you know, me myself too. I'm the first one that, you know, I learned that maybe we need to do a bit, maybe less and appreciate what we got. Where will people find you, Van? You got your own website?
Yes, I do. And I wrote, you told me that I had to write this in sort of mirror writing.
Yes.
And that took forever. I found it incredibly difficult to do.
You know,
okay, is that
you do have printers, you know. Okay, so let me read it for you. So it's www.gregorydowling.com, and you can find him both on Facebook as Gregory Dowling Writer and on Twitter as Gregory Dowling. Is there an end? No, Gregory Dowling. Okay, perfect. Okay, and on Instagram, of course.
Gregory Dowling 1.
Oh, what? Oh, they stole your name, have they?
Gregory Dowling 1.
Yeah, they stole your name. They stole your name on Twitter.
Oh, you mean, yeah, because I'm number one. Yeah, presumably, yes. There must, yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, and there are very few unique names out there, so, yeah.
So you know, some of your students were following you because I told them to. Okay, they say yes. Oh, and so I don't know if you know, but one of your students got stuck in Ireland with COVID, and she got stuck at the airport, and the Italian embassy.
Yes, I heard.
Yeah, what an odyssey.
I heard about it. Yeah.
And then she got. Yeah, so the Italian government literally left them alone. Then Alitalia took over, but.
Yeah.
So that was with Erasmus. So you know that was
yes.
Very nice.
I was in touch with a lot of students, a lot of Italian students. Because I'm an Erasmus coordinator for Foscari, and in particular the Erasmus students who were in England. This was the period when the UK didn't seem to be taking the problem seriously enough. And of course, all of these Italian students were in touch. They knew what was happening in Italy, and they were kind of freaking out. Why is it? Yeah, and so eventually they did all come back home.
Oh wow!
But yeah, it was yes, as you can imagine,
for the parents,
stressful for them, definitely. Yeah.
Okay, Gregory, I've got to say goodbye because I got my lines are going 1, 2, 3, 4.
Did you want? I brought some cheese because you said to
somewhere? Yes. Where from?
You said this cheese is something I found on the Lido market, Coldiretti.
Yes.
It's a wonderful cheesemaker called Nardini Formaggi. And they make only pecorino because they have their own herd of sheep down at the Po Delta, Cavanella Po near Adria.
That's interesting.
They make an absolutely wonderful, varied selection of pecorini and also some caprini.
Okay, so when tourists come back, because they will come back, what day is the Coldiretti market in Lido?
On Friday morning.
On Friday. Okay, that's great.
It's Nardini Formaggi. Nardini.
Fantastic. I'll put you on the video. Oh, fantastic. I'll put you on the subtitles when I do the video for YouTube.
Okay.
Brilliant. You just done perfect. Thank you so much. And keep indoors and stay safe.
And I'm sorry for my connection.
No, don't worry.